Okay, I'm going to be talking today about how to analyze data. Once you give an assessment, the question is, well, how do you use that in order to improve your perception of where students are at, how well different parts of the lesson went, what might need more emphasis, what might need to be changed, and so on. Um, I'm attaching or sending out this sheet as well. We're going to cover a couple different things. One is using Excel. Now, if you don't have Excel, it's usually available on just about any computer that you access anywhere. The Windows and the Mac version are slightly different, but it's similar enough that it shouldn't cause any problems. I have a Mac. I use it on Windows as well, but this will be from the Mac perspective. The only difference that you'll really have to worry about is when we try to get a pivot table, which is something that we're going to be doing later on. We're going to be talking about setting up our data, how it can be set up in order to make things easier for yourself. You don't have to do it this way. It's just one way to do it, but I find it pretty useful. We'll talk about various characteristics here. We're going to use some equations. We're going to create a pivot table, and a pivot table allows us to dig down into our data with just a few clicks of the mouse or the trackpad and figure out a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to look at then, once we make that pivot table, how we analyze our students' data. And the biggest thing I can say here is keep everything aligned with your objectives. We'll start with a whole class analysis. We'll look at the overall score. We'll look at some broad objectives, meaning, so if I have like 5 objectives, I can break it down and look at, well, how well did my students do on those 5 objectives? And if I'm wondering, maybe they didn't do so well on one particular objective, I can look deeper and figure out why didn't they do well on this particular objective. And that is going down into my sub-skills, my progressions, looking at individual items and so on, figuring out where things went wrong. Now that's for the whole class. I can also look at subgroups. I can look at students with special designations. In this case, in the data we're looking at, cognitive disabilities or English language learners. Could be you're gifted and talented. You could split it up by ability level, things that we're going to do, which is really the next step of looking at just achievement. You also have a whole bunch of other variables of interest that could play a role. Say you're teaching the same lesson to 2 different classes, right? And you find that one class seems to be very successful, the other class seems to be less successful. You look at your data and see if that really is the case, if your impressions of how well lessons are going is actually reflecting student performance and how well they're mastering these objectives. So, one thing that should be on D2L is this sample data set. And the first thing I want to talk about is how it's set up. I have my top row that tells me what are all the things and pieces of information, data that I have in here. I have each student's GPA, their gender, whether they are an ELL student or not, and zeros mean they're not, ones mean they are. CD stands for cognitive disability, and in this case again 0 means they don't, 1 means they do. Then I have their test data scores. I can look at this if I want to. This is made up data, by the way. I then have a 19-item assessment, and for each student, each row here again is a student. I have how they did on every single question. A 1 means they got it right, a 0 means they got it wrong. If I was giving out partial credit or each one of these items represented, multi-point thing, I could change the number of points, I could turn it into a percentage, I can do whatever I want. Once you set up this part, changing all this is pretty easy. What I can do with this then is I can generate my total averages pretty easily, and the easiest way I can do that is if I click on this, I can see what this looks like in here. I typed an equation into Excel that told it basically that I want this total cell for this student, this right here, for student number 1 in this row right here, to equal the sum of all the points they got divided by the total number of points there are. Now, in this case, I have 19 points. I just divided it by 19. Another way I could do it is if I might change it in the future, I might delete an item or whatever, I can add in another equation, and I can just have it count how many different values are in there. And then I can hit OK. When I click on this again, it'll give me my equation. So at any point where you forget what we did, you can always just click on the sheet and it'll tell you exactly what it's doing. In this case, it says equals the sum of this whole row divided by how many different things there are in there, in that row. I can, if I want to, I can just drag this down. Right? I could delete all this. And if I want to copy and paste something, I can either just drag it down, or I can copy and paste it. And what it does is, because I'm saying this is equaling this row here, this row, when I paste it into here, it automatically changes the row. Now this is row number 3 if you look up in here. 3, 3, 3, 3. If I go down a row, it'll say 4, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5, and so on. Okay, so I want you to be able to do that. Putting little equations, basic mathematical operations, is a great thing. Trust me on this one. Makes your life easy, because if I change something, say, oh, I made a mistake on this student's assessment, they really had this, right? It automatically updates everything I have linked to it. And that makes it so easy when you have to go back and regrade things. You're not entering things and adding things up all over and over and over again. So, the other things that we can do is we can look at each one of these objectives. Now, I color-coded the items that go with the different objectives. It was a 19-item test. Objective 1 had items 1 through 3. Objective 2 had items 4 through 6, and so on. So I have 3 for Objective 1, 3 for Objective 2, 4 for Objective 3, 5 for Objective 4, and 4 for Objective 5. If I want to look at how people did in the different objectives, I'm going to be typing those same kind of equations. And I'm just going to delete this to show you what I'm talking about. So in this cell, I need to always start with an equals, and that lets Excel know that I want this cell to do some sort of calculation. I want this to equal the sum of these particular objective items divided by the count of these particular objective items. I have to do the same thing over here. If I copy and paste this, because I'm pasting it one cell over, it only moves the equation one cell over. And I don't need it there. I need it to be an objective. Oops, that's not good. Got to be careful where you click in this. I just want it to be these items. Okay? Now in this one, I'm going to do it again, equals the sum of these divided by the count of these. Same thing here, equals sum of the items that I'm interested in divided by the count of those same items. Finally, last one, equals sum of these last 4 items divided by the count of these last 4 items. And now that I entered it into each column, I can just either drag it down by clicking on this little corner. See how the X changes? I just grab it, drag it down, it updates everything for me. Okay, now that is the whole kind of making the data. Because these files get big, I'm going to have another part 2 video that goes through the pivot table. So we'll be making that next. But make sure you feel comfortable with how this is set up and the different equations that you might use. Again, I have them listed right in here if you have any questions. Look for part 2.